Welcome to Journeys of Empowerment, where real experiences spark real change and conversations go deeper than the surface. I'm Michiel Sujit Rijt, and here we don't do small talk, we ignite transformation. Before we dive in, a quick shout out to our very first believer and sponsor, Neotopia. Trying to boost performance with new processes, extra training or tighter KPIs? That might not just be the issue. The real challenge? Behavior. Neotopia takes a different approach. One that actually sticks. No gimmicks, no guesswork. In the awareness workshop, you'll learn why good processes fail in execution, why learning doesn't stick, and how to build teams that own behavior, not just follow the rules. Because change shouldn't wear you out. It should move you forward. Ready to lead differently? Visit neotopia.nl. What if the bravest thing you could do as a leader was to simply be yourself? In this episode, I sat down with Marie Chaproniere, founder of the Behind the Mask community, a powerful movement reshaping how we show up at work. Her story is one of burnout, breakthrough, and bold authenticity. We explored the courage to unmask and lead with vulnerability. Her journey through burnout, boundaries, and reclaiming her voice. Embracing neurodiversity and ADHD as superpowers. And why community is the soil for workplace transformation. Marie reminds us true leadership is rooted in truth. Unmasking isn't weakness, it's courage. This one hit deep. A true learning experience in what it means to lead, live, and heal out loud. Let's start.
It's me.
Marie, we just started, so welcome to Journeys of Empowerment. I'm so glad and happy that you're here.
Thank you, me too. Happy to be here.
And it's fascinating because the moment, and this is the very first moment we met, and we see each other in real life. And it's like as if we know each other already for years, right?
Exactly.
And then now you were starting like, hey, but you're living in the Netherlands and in Amsterdam. So that's how our conversation started. And we were like, let's right away start and jump into the conversation. So, Marie, share a little bit of who you are.
Who am I? Well, Marie, from the UK originally. Been living in Amsterdam for the last 8 years. And as I was just saying to you, that we also divide our time between the UK, Amsterdam, and Spain. So my roots are Spanish. But my grandma lived in Spain and she immigrated to the UK in the 50s. And so she came over alone. And not long after that had my mum. And my mum was basically raised by my grandma. So it was just them initially. And there was a lot going on at that period of my life. My grandma didn't speak English. So my mum was raised speaking English and not Spanish because my grandma didn't want my mum to fall behind. But I've always had this, I always have this other feeling inside of me that there's this whole Spanish culture that I really want to get to know. And when I met my husband also 8 years ago, his father was living in Spain, around an hour away from where my grandma was born.
No, an hour away. It's no coincidence,
yeah,
right?
No coincidence. And so, that's now how we've come to decide together that we also want to have a place in Spain. My husband's dad passed away in 2019, and that was a turning point for both of us to say, actually, let's find something that can continue the legacy of both of us. And so now we divide our time, this nomadic lifestyle of, living here in Amsterdam, being from London, the UK, but also spending a lot of our time in Spain.
Thank you for sharing. And that brings me to a question, but it's right away a sort of deep question that comes from the conversation we had before we started recording, and it is about our identity. And I explained about the banyan tree we're looking at in our studio where we're sitting today, and it's the typical Indian banyan tree, the tree of life. And for me, that is a representation of about my personality being rooted in the Indian soil. Yet when it comes to how do I feel myself sort of 100% Dutch, yet with strong, long roots all the way up until the Indian soil. And here comes my question, is that when you are in Spain, is there a sort of deeper feeling of relatedness that you can feel there, rooted in your background and your genetics?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always felt that, and I've always felt that loss also of my mum, that she didn't get that opportunity to maybe explore and navigate what her roots are as much as what I'm doing now. You know, I know that she as a child was kind of going back and forwards to Spain quite often, but definitely when we were born, when she had her children, life looked then really differently. So I absolutely feel a deep connection to Spain and to our roots. My grandma is traditionally very Spanish. She carried her accent all the way through to her last days, which were in her early 90s. And so we were also raised, you know, in some senses, every time we visited my grandma, we would have our paella, you know, and she would swear at us and tell us her honest thoughts and opinions, as, you know, Spanish abuelas do. So, yeah, definitely I feel this sense of home by being there and through the culture.
Beautiful. Do you speak Spanish?
No.
You understand Spanish?
Yes, I do. And I can speak a little bit when I'm there. But this has been the challenge over the last few years. Also coming to understand like where you feel seen and visible in your lives. So my husband's fluent in Spanish.
Wow.
So when he
is Dutch?
He's English.
Okay, and where did you meet then?
We met in the UK.
You met in the UK and then you came together here?
We met in the UK. I came alone and then he came.
Beautiful. Okay.
Yeah.
So he's also originally from the UK?
Originally from the UK, yeah, exactly. And he's fluent in Spanish because his dad lived in Spain from a very young age. And so he was also speaking Spanish from a young age.
Beautiful.
So when I'm in Spain and he's there, and also maybe typically being a man, the conversation is always instantly directed towards the person that can speak the local language. And I was quite happy with that for the first few years. And then after a while, I was like, actually, I'm feeling like left out of the conversation and feeling invisible around like our friends who obviously naturally want to speak in their native language. So for the last couple of years when I've been there, I've been trying to take myself off, strangely, to Mallorca and stay in like a Spanish school for a couple of weeks and then get back and practice and then forget it all again when I come back to Amsterdam.
Yeah, but it is about consistency and being there, because otherwise, if I don't practice my English, it will really deteriorate very fast. It will really. So I have to practice. So what I do is recording audiobooks. The day I started my podcast, the first time. I heard myself, and I'm not very shy. People know that of me, and but I heard myself through the microphone and the headphone on, and I was like, I cringed because I was like, okay, Michiel, but yeah, now we start in Dutch. No, we don't, because 40% of my network is international. So I'm Mr. Inclusion. So I was like, no, we're going to start in English. So I'm every day. That's why the big book of Steve Jobs is the fifth of the sixth book I'm recording now. Every day, 10 minutes recording an audiobook, and not being forced anymore by myself to listen it back. So, but in the beginning, just recording an audiobook 10 minutes every day to hear yourself speaking the language is different than reading the language. And because all my books are in English, but it's only in your head. But hearing yourself speaking another language, that can be interesting.
Sometimes it is also because you're changing your entire personality. When I listen to my husband and then I also see his character changing, he turns into this like Spanish boy, and I'm like, who's that?
Interesting. Wow, we're right away jumping in. You are the founder and the really igniter spark behind the mask. Is it the movement? Is it the platform? Let's first unpack that. Yeah. What is behind the mask?
Behind the mask. To answer that question, is it a movement? Is it a platform? What is it? It is a movement. The movement is, what does it mean to bring your full self to work? And at Behind the Mask, we are challenging that narrative of what it truly means to bring your full self to work. Because I think there was a book released around 2018 that spoke a lot around the positivities of, being authentic in the workplace, which I truly believe. But there are a lot of risks when we look at not just the parts of ourselves that are accepted in the workplace, but also the parts of ourselves that are complicated, the parts of us that are really uncomfortable, maybe going through mental health challenges or divorce or grief, women's struggles, all of those things that there is still not enough conversation happening around those parts that make us human. Therefore, there's so much stigma that does take place. So people are seeing, I can be my authentic self here. I can bring my full self because that's the narrative that maybe that's embedded in the cultural values or it's written in our job descriptions. So I feel comfortable to be me. But what happens when the person does show parts of themselves that don't fit into our corporate spaces? That's when the challenges start to arise, and those challenges can be really detrimental to somebody's recovery and psychological safety when they share these parts and they're not met with, support, care, empathy, or even understanding. And so it's a movement on a journey to building a community of HR leaders, people leaders, change makers who believe in this mission of unmasking stigmas to come together to make this change in the workplace. And I believe that we can't do it without these people. That's what the community is being built for. And how we do this, it's together, and actually what do we need once the conversation starts? That's just one element of it. But what do we actually need to truly transform and change these workplaces? And so that's what we're kind of building behind closed doors. And that community needs to sit somewhere. And so the community will be built and live essentially on a platform. And so I'm in build mode at the moment, behind the scenes with the platform, in build mode with bringing community together and connecting community to emphasize the message and actually understand, what do we need? And then the movement is, I say movement because when I first started talking about this around 7 months ago.
7 months ago.
Which isn't that long ago. It was quite a scary thing for people to understand. They didn't quite acknowledge or understand what we were trying to do or deliver, or the meaning behind it. And so I would receive questions like, well, how far will you go with this? As if it's, going to be damaging for reputation, or, but what if people don't want to talk? What if people don't want to share?
No, but who were asking these kind of questions? Was it on the corporate side, or was it on the participant side?
On the corporate side.
Okay.
So on the corporate side, these questions rose because it was a case of, maybe also that sense of, well, actually, people feel happy here. We're accepting, we're inclusive, and we're not saying that, we're not also, we're not going against any organisation. It's not a retaliation. It's more so just a space to get people to build empathy and to understand that there's a lot more that goes on behind the masks than what we truly show.
And where do you think the resistance come from? It's not about which companies. It's about a sort of resistance to what? What do you think it is? It feels kind of resistance for me.
Definitely. And I think we're shifting away from that. As I was sort of saying, is that when I first started talking about it, it felt like resistance. It felt, there were people in the community who were like, wow, we need this. But in the corporate space, like, no, we're doing everything we can. We've got a great place to work. People feel like they can be themselves here and so on. But over the last 6-7 months, I've really seen a shift. And I don't know if that's because my eyes are now wide open, but I see a lot more people showing up in an authentic way that shows those parts of themselves that actually, they are going through certain struggles and they do want space to talk about it and so on. So where does the resistance come from? I would say that definitely you have this image when you're working for an organisation. The organisation has clients and customers, and they need to present themselves in front of their customers, to, of course, attract the right people. And reputation-wise is always going to be at stake. And there's some organisations that really tune into, no, we're a very people-first, human-centred workplace, and that truly means that we support people in, and meet people where they're at. And then you have the opposite spectrum of, we're a corporate organisation and we need to follow the way in which we've always done things, and we have a traditional narrative that we need to fulfill, and we, maybe without saying it, but there's this understanding of conformity within an organisation of how you communicate, how you behave, the policies that are set in stone. I've seen organisations that want every country and region to have the same perks and benefits to be consistent. But of course, that's not
one size fits all
working,
no.
Right? And the same goes for how we treat human beings. You and I may both have lost people within our lives, but how we grieve is also really different. And so we might need different things. You might need more time than I do, or you might need extra aid or, external support to a therapist, or some adjustments with your working schedule and so on. And I may need something completely different. So I truly just believe in treating people with, meeting them with where they're at and treating people as the human beings. And I think there are workplaces that are shifting to, what it means to truly be people-centred. And others still have, in my opinion, a bit more catching up to do.
Is there a sort of ideal world view where you're working towards? Because I can imagine it has a lot to do with how we feel being somewhere, but how can we make it sort of clear that we're working towards something which is all about feelings? That makes it. Can we almost make it tangible? What is the most tangible? Maybe that's the question. Most tangible way to describe the ideal worldview and workplace we would love to have.
Yeah, I mean, it is tangible. If we connect, it's not feelings, right? We're obviously sharing vulnerable moments that allow us to express our emotion and how we feel and to talk about things. But actually, what happens when we are not met with empathy? What happens when we are not surrounding ourselves in places where we belong? What happens when we are hiding behind this mask and showing up every day and striving for perfection when we have baggage and, and stuff going on? So what happens with that? What happens is that person starts to perform less. They potentially are going to be reaching the burnout. There's going to be mental health related struggles. Their performance is going to go right down. And so those stats, connecting those statistics, those points that are business related cases, they are costly to organisations. When you connect those dots with, okay, what's behind the burnout? What's behind the, top performer who's now not performing? Those types of things, right? When we connect the dots in those ways, that's how we can also, inspire and encourage. Through what we're building with the movement, that's also about to figure that out. So without maybe going into too much detail, but the events that we host, so these intimate dinners where we get leaders, HR leaders and the change makers around the table to show up as they are. Of course, there are some very deeply personal, vulnerable moments. And that, for me, is the first part of our mission at Behind the Mask, which is to unmask these stigmas. So now we've got leaders in a room showing up authentically or as themselves, sharing stories that they maybe haven't shared with anybody. And they're doing it instantly as soon as we're walking into the room. The second part of our mission, from unmasking stigmas to changing workplaces, is, okay, so let's actually tackle how are we together with these brilliant minds in the room going to ensure that we can do this. So that's the second part. And we do this in, round table sessions with real key prompts. And to give you an idea, there were many amazing ideas that came out, but there was one leader who is not comfortable always to be vulnerable, talking about men's mental health and saying, I'm going to hold myself accountable. And the next step, the next move I make in the organisation that they're working for is to start an employee resource group for men around mental health.
Very well. Very good.
And these are real, this is our third dinner. These are real ideas and sparking conversations and making change, because we're giving these leaders goalposts and also inspiring them, so they come away from this with a pledge that they are holding themselves accountable for something. And we can see that they've committed in this, in these events, in these dinners, that they are now holding themselves accountable. But the beautiful thing about community is that we're all holding each other accountable for what we've pledged and committed and spoken about, and and so on. So
beautiful. Are you also thinking about organizing follow-up dinners?
Yeah.
So because that would be interesting.
Yeah.
Put your money where your mouth is,
Exactly.
and then also present to each other what and holding each other accountable. Yes, that sounds very very necessary and good. Yet always also interesting. How does it work in real life after a certain period of time? Right.
Exactly.
If it's not your default, you can easily slip back to doing the business as usual. And
100%.
That would be great.
100%. They're the small success stories that I really want to see through the community. That's just one tangible, measurement that we can connect to and come back to in another 6 months, and bring these leaders together again to show us what they've done. So that's one part. And of course, through the platform itself, like, what do we want to see on this platform? How can they get the most out of it? And that could look like many different things.
And you're only 7 months away. 7 months. So it's only 7 months ago that the first dinner was.
No, so we launched the idea.
Yeah.
We announced this community at the end of November last year. The first dinner was hosted at the end of February.
No, so short.
Yeah, so in a really short space of time, we've grown the community to over 1,000 followers on LinkedIn. So that's a lot of engagement for us, of people who are saying and confirming, hey, this resonates, I want to be a part of this. And then we've had 3 dinners already in Amsterdam, where we have 16 leaders each time. The first dinner was incredible. We had the opportunity to co-create values together. So what does this community really stand for?
That was my next question. Are there some values behind? Because you sound very value driven. That makes me utterly curious, and I believe the audience too. Like, okay, but what are the driving values behind building Behind the Mask? So maybe you can share those, because please do. I'm really curious.
So this was really instrumental for me. It was so necessary to start with building values. And I've worked in talent acquisition for the last 15 years. I've worked in building employer branding, working with DEI, so diversity and inclusion, and also leading and helping form employee resource groups across the organization. So employee resource groups, for those who are not familiar, are small groups of, let's say, mini communities inside an organization, where people have a sense of belonging. So we had created neurodiversity employee resource group for the Black employee resource group. We had the LGBT, we had women in tech, and so on. And anyone within the organisation can start and create
a mini safe space.
A mini safe space, which it often feels like that. But after a few years of kind of working with DEI budget, working with employee resource groups, what I've noticed, and what doesn't align truly with me, is that often we're given a really small budget. These employee resource groups are led by minority groups, oftentimes, who are, given this, what I would say is like a force. You're doing something you love. It's something you're passionate about. Will give you 10% or 20% of time, working time, for you to do this. But actually, these employee resource groups are here for a reason. We're here because we feel as though we don't really feel safe, or feel as though we belong within these expectations of what it is to be as part of a working environment. And so towards like my last year and a half, I was really trying to challenge the norms of what an ERG is. I was often getting into a little bit of friction because I was trying to say, like, hey, if we have women again taking on roles where we're actually losing 10 to 20% of our working time because we feel as though we want to create an environment which is better for women. We want to see more women in leadership roles. We want more inclusive interview processes and so on. So my counter argument was always, by the end, actually, these are great, but they're often performative. A given budget to throw a party, to celebrate once a year. And actually, what changes are we making internally? How are we really truly seeing these changes inside the organisation? Because we haven't got a representation from our leadership teams. The budget is often really small, and this is time out of my day. And so I think those who are leading ERG should be paid for that work. Not given a round of applause and saying like you're doing something that you enjoy. No, we're doing this because I'm discriminated, or I've had challenges or faced adversity. So going back to...
No problem, to the values.
Yeah, to the values question. I was met at a time in my career and in my life where I was questioned on my own values through what I thought was living the values of being myself, by sharing a lot around my diagnosis with ADHD, showing the real side of ADHD, not just the supposed superpowers and things that make us great and quirky and fun, but actually when you combine something like an ADHD diagnosis or non-diagnosis with some challenges or mental health challenges, it can actually be a really tough experience for somebody, or addiction or whatever those things are. And so I always like to show the true side of what that is. And I'd been doing that for quite a period of my time. And, I was really getting into this side of really challenging the status quo. And I realized that in certain environments, there just wasn't space for that. And so when I felt challenged, or I felt as though I wasn't fitting in, or I felt uncomfortable with, why is no one listening to me? Why am I not being seen and heard? I realised that it's because my values aren't aligning here. Mm-hmm. And that's often in our lives, right? Like we come into friction with things like conflict with friends or disagreements with family members and so on. It's often because our values are being
out of tune,
or triggered or misalignment. And that's okay, right? That is okay a lot of the time, but it does drive our behaviours. Our values do drive our behaviours. And so I wanted to make sure with the community that the first thing that we did was actually align on, okay, what are our values here? And not only that, but making it really clear that these are not just words. These are also descriptions, and we are all aligned on the meaning of the word curious or courageous or authenticity, which we didn't choose, but we went for unmasked, which to me means the same thing. To take off your masks is to be authentic.
Was there also the name came out of the value? So there wasn't a name, or was the name already there?
The name was already there.
And the meaning behind it was the same as authenticity, but differently named.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, when we started our values session during this dinner, me and I had a co-founder initially. We came up and established that we wanted to build this community together. And we decided that unmask has to be the first value. That has to be the first value. So we expressed that this is the chosen value, that, this is our core, our roots of who we are. And then centered around unmasking, unmasked, is also the other values that were built, which was curiosity. Because we need to first be curious in ourselves to be curious about other people. And often we are, stigmas there because we are judging people for what we don't know or what we perceive. And actually, we need to get curious first. We need to ask the whys and what's going on and what happened to you. And, all of those things. So curiosity is one of the values, courageous, because one, to unmask and to stand boldly, to tell your story in your truth and everything else, you need to have courage. And a lot of that courage is also having, as a leader, you need to have tough conversations. If you see your performer is underperforming, again, get curious about why. Don't judge them for it. Question why first. And that often will take a tough conversation, because maybe asking the why is going to lead you down a route of unexpectedness. Because what goes on behind the mask is often not what we expect. It's often not even half the time about work.
No, it is. Work is only part of who. Do you believe work is part of who we are or what we're doing? We have to choose. Because if I ask who are you, normally 9 out of 10 you get everything what people are doing and work and maybe background in school and education and university and whatever. But it takes a very long time before you hear, okay, but who are you? But what do you believe? Is work part of what you're doing or who you are?
If the work you do is aligned to your values, it's part of you. If you're misaligned with your values and there's no purpose to your job, then it's just what you're doing. And sometimes that's also necessary, right? Depending on your situation. I think that, and it's interesting because I was recently in Indonesia on a retreat. And I spent the first week on an 8-day yoga retreat, beautiful retreat run by I'm going to name drop her because she's fabulous. Of course. Rosie Turner, who is running an ADHD training and also teaching yoga and Pilates and coaching, and it's just fabulous. So she ran this retreat and I joined for this retreat, and I often noticed that she was spending a lot of her time working. And I'd said to her, like, oh, Rosie, you're working a lot. And she was like, but I love what I do, so it's not work. And that really triggered something inside of me. And I thought, that's absolutely right. We're often judging ourselves for like overworking and or not working enough, whatever it is. But actually, if you're aligned to what you're doing and it brings you joy and it's giving you energy and it's aligning with your why and your purpose, then is it really work or is it just a part of you? Maybe
a calling.
Yeah, exactly. Just to wrap up the values. So we also had empathy-led. Key part is putting yourself in somebody's shoes to understand who the person is in front of you. And sometimes that's really hard to do. It's often really hard to do, especially if we, we have this intersectionality of our own identities and what makes up a human being. And we all have different experiences and upbringings and, race or gender or sexual orientation and so on. And so that can be really challenging to be able to empathize. And and put yourself in somebody else's shoes. So I think that is our final value.
I love them. And, well, there's something resonating for my personal and also the principles which the podcast is based on. So stay open-minded while having my own opinion, not holding, but having, because you can easily shift your own opinion instead of holding. Holding is for me more fixed and having. So stay open-minded while having my own opinion. And also asking questions to enrich the conversation out of curiosity. So it's deeply aligned with what I believe, and I love the unmasking. And and we were going deep today in unmasking ourselves, right? And already in the pre-conversation. Before we move also to the more to understand and help people understand why you're doing what you're doing, I would really love to take a little step back. You mentioned as soon as the people enter the gathering which you organized, it's in two parts, and the first is also creating space to open up and tell your truth. And what makes a room? What do we have to understand to create such a gathering? I mentioned the book of Priya Parker, The Art of Gathering. What makes a gathering inviting to open up to people you don't even know? What is the sort of secret sauce behind that? How does that work? People ask me, Michiel, you have so many people in the podcast and they really open up about themselves. How do you do that? And I still can't answer that question. We have a genuine conversation, but if you ask me, Michiel, what are the principles and how does it work? Well, I cringe. I don't know.
Yeah.
So maybe for me, there's something to learn for our listeners, and also to create safe space at work.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the most important parts of the evening, of course, to give people that sense of safety. I won't give away, too much about the evening itself, but we do establish, very early on, even through the people that we invite to the dinners, to the event. So at the moment, the events are very highly curated, down to me really trying to understand who is this person that I want at the dinner. What's their backgrounds? Where are they from? What can I see without maybe knowing them? So it really starts with bringing the right people in the room. And I think you also have created that because you are bringing people who are aligned to this empowerment, this movement, this empowerment that you are trying to deliver or are delivering through your podcast. And so, yeah, in some senses, that's the same thing. It's the same goes for workplace culture, right? When you're hiring people, I saw something funny on LinkedIn actually, or somewhere that said, don't hire people that you don't want to be in a Slack channel with. And I thought that's really funny because it's actually very true. We are inviting people into a safe space, to an organization, maybe into your teams. And you want people to feel this sense of belonging regardless of their backgrounds and so on. And so finding the right people is really important. And yeah, you do that through mutual connection and understanding of values and so on. The second part of that is storytelling. Because people resonate with your stories, and in order to connect with somebody, we have to share stories that are going to resonate in some way or that people can relate to. And so showing up vulnerably and sharing parts of yourself also allows people to feel comfortable and safe and ready to do so.
I believe that too. Allows and invite.
Yes, because also as a leader, when you are with your team member and you are saying, what's wrong with you? Why are you not performing? What's going on? But you yourself have not, shared those parts of yourself or shown your team that it's actually okay to run off, to pick up your kid who's sick from school. And those types of environments and settings are safe to do so because we understand that you're human. Or again, you're not sharing today before your meeting that you're tired or you had a bad night's sleep, or those minor moments that are really humane, that make somebody feel safe and comfortable. So that's the second part, to storytell and to be more humane. Another part is trust building, right? So not just being vulnerable and sharing our stories, but to build trust. And you have to commit then that I want you to know that this either stays in the room or, we're not going to say who says what.
No.
And that is really important and key as well.
I believe that.
Because we all have boundaries and we need to understand what our boundaries are as well. So I think whether you're a facilitator, an event host or a leader, whatever that is, that you understand what are those boundaries with your team. Simple things for the events, like I'm always saying to people, don't be afraid to come on your own, or if you don't like your photo being taken, let us know. Those small moments, again, create this sense of, okay, I know what I can be or can't be. And just allowing people, I think, just allowing people to be truly themselves is a recipe for that.
Yeah, and it's thank you, because it helps also me better understand, hey, what is the process of the podcast and why do we have such open conversations with so many amazing guests like you are. And one of the things I believe in is I really believe in the pre-video call we had before.
Yeah, I was going to mention that to you.
Because there you can test the water. I always ask, of course, the question, what are specific boundaries I have to respect? Because I didn't mention it many times in the podcast in and on itself, but it's in a what to expect document. So that's the first part, what to expect document. Also with the principles behind the podcast, of course, a URL to the website, but that doesn't necessarily have to help. It adds a little bit more trust. But the thing is, I believe in the pre-video conversation, there's something happening, and there the first level of trust starts to build up. And so that's maybe part of also Journeys of Empowerment, why we're and now I really what I believe is it's a calling. When you talk about your movement and what you're trying to achieve and what you're achieving, what you're building, this is so fueled and so intrinsic motivated that it doesn't feel at work, right?
No.
Where does that fuel come from?
Yeah. Where does the fuel come from that it doesn't feel like work? So it comes from two different places. One's more emotional, I would say, than the other. I'm going to start with the other. I think a lot of it has to do with my ADHD. Genuinely, I would say that I get a lot of, naturally my brain is low on dopamine. And now I'm doing things that are giving me a lot of dopamine. And so I have this innate attention to my special interests, things that I am obsessing over. And so a lot of my drive is coming from this hit of dopamine that I'm getting every time I'm doing something that I'm enjoying. And so that is one part of it. But the core drive of, you know, why I'm doing this and what is behind the fuel to just keep going is, I guess, you know, really truly from all of the adversity that I felt, that I had experienced before I got to this point. And so when I talk about those moments, it kind of goes back even longer than, you know, two years. I was already feeling incredibly tired, incredibly burnt out from, I guess, like post-COVID, working in talent acquisition. Everything was go, go, go. And then a team member of mine, suddenly we were coming back after Christmas, and a team member of mine was burnt out, and I didn't see them for 3 months. And I had already felt burnt out and needed a break. But what happened during that point was I had to then pick up myself and then again for somebody else. And so, you know, I guess the masks were constantly just on during those times of, okay, you know, what can I do to ensure my teammate gets back and they're ready and that they're supported and that the rest of the team is also, you know, doing okay, and that we're doing what we need to do to continue to deliver at the pace that we were already delivering. Mm-hmm. And so when I look back, I think it started around that time where I felt burnt out and I ignored all the signals. And then I was getting married. And I decided to move the wedding date from October to June. So the year timeline I had went to a 6-month-ish timeline. And I threw myself into wedding planning at the same time as feeling really burnt out. But again, it's given me all this dopamine. You know, that's the interesting thing about the ADHD brain, is that I'm used to chaos. I'm used to working differently and trying to find solutions to catch up or to be where, you know, everyone else is and doing it in my own way. And so I felt the burnout, but then I had the wedding and it was shiny and I was, you know, preparing for that. And I did that in 6 months, but I started to notice during that period that I had these long headaches that were going on for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then after the wedding, a couple of days after, and I share this because it is part of my story, I had a falling out with my parents. And that was something that I didn't expect because it was so close to the wedding. And we, you know, everything was fine within a 6-month period. But what happened then was that it triggered some very old emotions for me. And I wouldn't say I went into a depression, but I definitely started to disassociate. And so I began a disassociation process of my burnout, how I was feeling, this rejection that I felt, you know, the trauma, the pain. And I went into a cycle of not being able to sleep. And sleep is, you know...
seriously damaging your health and well-being.
Your health and well-being. And I would show up every day. I would show up in the office. I would, you know, come on 1 or 2 hours sleep. I had like, you know, guys and girls sitting down with me, and we would figure out sleeping patterns, and they would recommend books and pills and all kinds of things. And this was going on for quite some time. But, you know, I'd already started. I'd started the disassociation. I was already feeling extremely burnt out. I knew I was neurodivergent, but I wasn't officially diagnosed. I was on a very long waiting list for the diagnosis. And also, after a wedding, what comes naturally with a couple? A plan for a family. And so this pressure for getting pregnant after we got married on myself, you know, being in my late 30s now, along with this and the burnout, the disassociation. And I got to this point where I remember a colleague saying to me, what do you do on the weekends? What do you do on the weekends? And who are you outside of work? And I felt really embarrassed because I thought, I do the same thing every weekend. I get up and I walk my dogs, and maybe I go to the market, and that's it. And, you know, what do you do when friends come over? I'm going to the same restaurants and, you know, things like that. And I kept trying to associate, like, I want to share something that makes me true to me. And what's interesting, maybe you recognize this, maybe you didn't, I had a tendency to talk about other people, my husband first, and his life and his, you know, how the greatness and the cool things that I saw in other people before me. Mm-hmm. So I found that I wasn't talking about myself. I was talking about other things in my life that I felt made me me, but they wasn't making me me. So that was a changing moment for me, because I then went on this discovery of who am I again? And I started to seek things that were shiny. I started to explore myself a little bit more, understand who I was, connect with new people. I set myself this like insane goal of every month I want to meet like 10 new people. Instead of hobbies, it turned into people, you know.
Recruiter mindset, 10 days and up again.
Exactly. You know, but like, yeah, I mean, it's just not possible to do this. But I was doing this. And then I decided during that period, I'm going to start talking about my ADHD journey. And so I started to write a lot about my ADHD. And what I realized is my ADHD wasn't my identity, but by removing those masks and revealing parts of myself, I was actually able to connect myself with people that I found interesting, you know, that made me feel like me, that made me feel seen, that made me feel heard, and that by me sharing, it allowed other people to feel seen and heard and everything else. And so that journey began of who am I and connecting. But of course, when you're already in a burnout and you start to do all of these things and you start to notice you've disassociated from your life, and you're focused so much, you've zoomed out so much from what's present, you're focused so much on who you now want to be and how you want to show up and everything else, that there's this huge gap. And that gap led me to actually turn up one day in the office and a colleague say to me, I'm worried about you. And then to me spending like a week at home after my grandma died, like a month after, and I was at home with my parents, and I didn't tell any of my friends that I was there, so I disassociated so much. But I went to meet all of my new friends that I founded on LinkedIn that were based in London. And I really got a lot of energy from all of that. But at the same time, I spent the whole week, I didn't realize that I spent the whole week not talking to friends. I wasn't eating. You know, I was dealing with a lot of stress at the time. And not long after that, not only did my colleagues say to me, I'm worried about you, my husband said, everyone's worried about you. And obviously all my guards went up, and I was like, what do you mean everyone's worried about me? I'm fine. But I wasn't fine. And I realized I wasn't fine. I was tired. I was so exhausted. And I was so tired. I hadn't been sleeping. I hadn't been eating. Hadn't been seeing friends. I didn't want to. I just wanted to start again. it was like I wanted to run away in moments of time. And also then in the workplace, everything was changing. My role was changing. The business had been acquired. I was lacking a lot of dopamine because things were very slow internally. Whilst I'm adaptable, I'm also not great in moments of change. Change is very stressful for me. In the smallest details. I mentioned to you earlier that I was supposed to get a lift here today. I was supposed to be driven here, and, we had this whole afternoon planned, and in my head, that's what we were doing. And last minute that changed. And that sent me into a bit of a meltdown almost of like, but we said we were doing this and now we're not, so great in adapting, being around lots of different people, chameleon, but in change of process and plans, I can sometimes struggle in that. And that's what was happening also in my work environment. And so all of these things combined, personal, professional, undiagnosed ADHD that knows that I don't do well in conformity and, highly process-driven areas. And if I'm not creative and not using those parts of my brain correctly, I'm almost a dead soul. So that's what happened. And I burnt out. I signed off of work. But I was confused and conflicted because the doctor described it as a high-functioning burnout. So I was not burnt out in terms of I cannot look at a screen. I just couldn't have anyone else picking my brain. I could work on things that were new, creative, exciting, but I couldn't have anyone else telling me what to do. I couldn't have anyone else that was changing the way in which, we'd built things that I knew worked, systems and processes that I knew worked, and picking my brain, not working together on something.
Almost sounds like extreme allergic. You became extreme over allergic for conformity.
Yeah. And I resisted that. And I resisted that for a couple of years, even though people around me had said, they gave me the cues. They said, things are changing. You're most likely not going to enjoy them. And so, there was a lot of adaptations to how I could work during that time. I realized coming back into my recovery, I needed to work in short sprints. I realized that the work was, no longer stimulating, and I didn't have the autonomy and the budget and everything else. So I was actually moving into an employer branding role, which was completely without a team, giving me an opportunity to use creativity and everything else that I knew I could do, and I was excited for that. But then when that was also met with, but we can do things in a certain way, but we have to do it like this. And I was also getting stronger and realizing what my values were and who I was and things that I believe in around like people and human-centered workplaces. And so I think a very obvious situation came where my mental health just plummeted. My mental health plummeted. I was being challenged almost on my views around, how I also talk about neurodiversity, where I'm not talking about the positivities and all the time. I'm telling people the real stuff and the stuff that also I believe matters. Again, how this presents itself, or this perception, because we all have a perception of something, was not always met with the kindness or the empathy. And so, I noticed, my own journey, through my own recovery what I needed. I needed to be met with a lot of care. I needed to be met with understanding and empathy and curiosity, and I needed a space to show up authentically. And what authentically means to me is to be true to who you are and to be real and to show those parts of yourself that make you feel like yourself, and for that to be okay and not judged or questioned or criticized or, you know, all of those things.
That makes very clear why you're doing what you're doing. It's a rocket fuel.
Yeah. And the interesting part of it is that when Behind the Mask started, the journey was really different. You know, we launched the community whilst I was still employed at another organisation, and I naively thought it was a great thing. And it is a great thing, but I thought it was a great thing. But I realised that actually, you know, not all organisations are actually ready for their employees to work for you, but also do something that makes them feel alive, or work on, let's call it like a side project or a hustle or something else. They, you know, a lot of organisations just want you to follow suit and to come
make your hours focus.
Yeah, which is absolutely fine, right? Like if it works, it works. That also works for some people. It doesn't work for everybody, and definitely didn't work for me. And I was resisting my own clear view of what I needed and where I was. And I had this vision of what employer branding could also look like. You know, and there's sometimes just some misalignments, and we have to be okay to sort of say that that's okay, which I am now. But at that point, you know, I think particularly combined with rejection sensitive dysphoria, those hits of, oh, this placement or your place in life no longer feels like your place in life, and you have other people telling you what they see but you're not ready to see it yet. It almost feels like a rejection, and the recovery and that pain is harder and tougher on yourself. So when we launched, it was in a very different place. We launched after a couple of weeks. You know, there was a decision made that actually recovery was needed, and to take that time to recover. And so it's been 5 or 6 months, and I would say it's only been in the last month or so that I feel as though I am back on the ground. Wow. It's like a therapy session, this, isn't it?
Thank you. No, but thank you very much for your openness and for sharing. And there is no question if it's intrinsic motivated. It comes from deep down. It comes from dark places. Why you're doing what you're doing, and the question that pops up in my mind is, with the lived experience of now, and I don't believe it's only post a pandemic. It's I think the starting point of burnout is maybe rooted very much earlier, and the misalignment maybe occurs at some point, but it's already inside us, and we are in denial, or we think, it's a well-paid job, and whatever reason we find justifying that we feel a certain growing misalignment. So this brings me to my question, and therefore explains a little why 5 years instead of 2 years. If you, with the lived experience of now, would advise the 5-year younger you, give one piece of advice, what would, with the lived experience of now, what would you advise yourself 5 years before now?
Yeah. I really think, like, without realizing it, I was not doing enough. I'd stepped away from doing the work on myself because I was happy, happy in, I guess you almost kind of settle when you find a relationship and you settle into that relationship and you feel super content and, you focus on other things in life. And if you go back to prior to, I spent quite a considerable amount of time on my own before I met my partner, and I was doing a lot of the work on myself, and I think that's why we came together. And then of course you relocate to another country and you're figuring out lots there. That journey also wasn't quite easy. Stepping into a new country with a new language and a different culture, a different working environment. And so I think that the advice that I would give myself is to slow down and do the work that you started. Continue to do the work that you started. And that is looking deeply at yourself. Because I feel as though, as you said, like the burnout obviously started quite a long time ago. And when I look at my burnout and I look at those moments of not feeling in the right alignment, it has been because I've fit myself into spaces that I've enjoyed because it's growth and it's learning or they're sparkly or whatever it is. But I haven't truly set my boundaries in those spaces of what I need. And I'd done that for so long, forcing myself into, and it's other things as well, like social settings, forcing myself into social settings that felt uncomfortable for me, but I would be doing them for other people, or doing it because I felt as though I had to, because I had no other choice. And not to say they were wrong for me or they, weren't the right environments or anything like that, but I didn't set my boundaries with what I needed. So I'd go even if my batteries were low. I'd stay even if my batteries were low. Those sorts of decisions that I'm now able to understand myself a lot more because I've taken that time to truly say, I'm not coming, or I'm not staying after work for social drinks, or I'm not moving from this chair because I'm really comfortable here. And, and that's not me being rude, but it's because I feel as though I don't have the energy to maybe go around and talk to everyone, or I feel uncomfortable, or overstimulated, or overwhelmed, or, whatever those things are. And so, that's the advice that I would give, to look inwards and to slow down and to get to know who you are and what you need. Because when I wasn't doing those things and when I wasn't listening to myself, also because I didn't have the vocabulary to be able to do that.
To put it in words.
Yeah, I just felt things. I felt things and I couldn't articulate what I was feeling.
What helped you to find the words?
A lot of it is my diagnosis.
Yeah.
A lot of it was the diagnosis of ADHD. So I was diagnosed late. The official diagnosis only came last year. But a few years before that, I self-diagnosed. And that's also, in part of my burnout and all of this masking, because I didn't self-diagnose because I saw it on TikTok or anything like this. My sister came to me and was trying to understand our mum, actually. And I went down the rabbit hole of understanding, because I laughed, right? I was like, Mum hasn't got ADHD. At that point, I didn't really know anything about it. I hadn't heard about it. No, you don't go to a dinner and half the room is neurodivergent 3 years ago. It just wasn't talked about as much. And so I went down that rabbit hole, which was a key sign. I spent like 10 hours throughout the night researching ADHD And I'd said to some friends, like, I think my mum's got ADHD, and I said to my mum, I said to my dad, and I was constantly, it became my obsession. And through that obsession, I realized actually we're describing me. We're describing me and my behaviors. The only reason why it took me a while to spot those things is because I knew these things about my upbringing. I saw them in my upbringing. I saw the chaos, the messy house, the doodles everywhere, the impulsiveness and the impatience and the hyperactivity. I saw all of that in the home that I grew up in. And I tried my very best throughout my years to present in a very different way, because I didn't want to show up in those ways. And so my masking had been going on for a very, very, very long time. But I realized underneath all of that, I was exactly the same. I just had taught myself how to mask to fit in. So, yeah, it does. It goes back a very long time. And then you, of course, go through all these moments. And with an official diagnosis, I also went through a grief. That grief.
Yeah.
Who am I truly? We could talk about this for forever, but there are so many layers, because again, like, humans are layered and complex and messy and complicated and chaotic and all of those things.
Wow, Marie, what a deep dive it is!
I know.
Holy, and it's.
Shall I go?
I feel no. You go no. Of course not. But I believe this is only the starting point. We have to come back and have another a conversation. Thank you for your openness and for sharing this, because it makes it, and I love and I hope it will resonate with a lot of people, because the love of my life has also a diagnosed on a very late age ADHD. Yeah, now I said it right. And the knowing part is one, but finding words and to express and to understand yourself, and to allow yourself, but also your environment is also very important. Are they judging? Because you're sort of coming out with the diagnosis, but also acknowledging and also being very open and demasking what you have been masking for years on a row. And I feel very sorry for her that her environment doesn't support it and in a very heavy way. And I can only imagine what. And of course, I'm experiencing it firsthand, because she is the love of my life. But how important a supporting environment and support system is.
Definitely. Yeah, that is so incredibly important. It is so incredibly important. And I don't think it's because people choose to be, I don't know, obviously, about your
love of my life.
Love of your life. Yeah. I don't know their situation, but I can talk from my own experiences that I don't believe the people around me were not supportive. I just think they were not informed. I think that they were not informed. And also, another part of this is that if you have been heavily masking your entire life, and then suddenly you're learning all these things, you have this new language to describe your experiences and what you're going through, what about the people that are now seeing this unmasked version of yourself and experiencing that? So I do have empathy on both sides, that there is this element of grief on if you're in a relationship, or maybe your friends are seeing parts of you that they had never truly seen before. And your workplace, you know, like I can also imagine for me, have been like also in a high performing role, successful, the team was doing well. Suddenly I met with these challenges, and I am extremely dedicated to these new causes, that this is a bit shaky. And whilst they're positive things, you know, the place in which you are expected to show up as you were before your traumas and all of these things, you know, and then maybe also seeing a different version of you now, it's challenging. So we need to have empathy. I think that's the biggest thing, right? We need to build empathy for each other, which is putting yourself in somebody else's shoes and lived experiences. So,
true.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
And it takes time.
And it
takes
does.
time, energy, space, empathy.
Yeah. And also for yourself, it's like I've met, as you can imagine, I have had quite a lot of people, either diagnosed, non-diagnosed, coming to me and wanting to understand and have a conversation and learn about themselves. Also with the unmasking, like, oh, it looks so brave and I see you showing up and being completely yourself. Like, how do you do it and how do I do it? It's also another thing where half the battle is like, are you sure you're ready for that as well? Because I face a lot of adversity through showing up authentically. A lot of greatness has come, but also in the spaces that I felt I needed to be held, I needed to be seen, I needed to be supported. I wasn't always met with that, and so it's also not easy, right? Yeah.
And that's why Behind the Mask is so important.
Yeah, exactly.
It brings us back to Behind the Mask.
Yeah.
And to wrap up this first conversation we have in this podcast is, what are you up to with Behind the Mask? Is there something to reveal? Is there something coming, or are you going to organize the next? So what's next?
Yeah. That's a good question, because I also forgot to say this at the dinner, so this is a good time. We kind of touched on it a bit at the beginning. So when I built the community, I never expected for it to move as quickly as it has, which is why I say it's a movement, because people are moving, they are, you know, following and supporting and showing up. I also never expected that I wouldn't be working at the company that I was working for at the time. So that was a big change for me. I also expected that my recovery would have happened a lot sooner from my burnout than it did. But where we stand today, I have registered Behind the Mask as a business. So it's not an idea. It's not just a concept. It's
a chamber of commerce, and it's the official business.
It's an official business. We're now a business, and it's me, myself, and I currently. Me, myself, and I, we're a registered business. The website is about to go live. And on that website, we'll have opportunities for corporate spaces to engage with Behind the Mask through events, initiatives, maybe some work spaces. I would love to see, if we have any corporate listeners, any HR leaders, I would love to see the corporate space wanting an unmasked dinner for their leadership teams.
Ooh, that would be great. I have somebody in the back of my mind. Okay. I won't mention her name and the company deliberately for now, because I didn't have the chance to ask her first before. And I'm not from naming without first consent, but she will love this initiative. And I think she will be the first to support it.
Well, there we go. This is what
Am
we
I getting
want.
you curious?
We can talk after. So that's one element. Website's going live soon. We've registered the business. We've got next week, I'm in Berlin. Mm-hmm. I'm speaking at an event in Berlin.
Is it with Avery together?
No, my event is with We Are Developers.
Yeah.
And I'm hosting a dinner in Berlin for the community in Berlin, together in partnership with Avery.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's an unmasking dinner. Alicia is letting me take full reins of the experience, and he's actually joining us to share his founder story. I'm sure much of what you've discussed together on your podcast.
Beautiful.
You've also had him.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited.
It was
about
an amazing
that.
ride. And you said the same as you did. It felt like therapy.
Yeah, really. I know. I'm actually, my therapist cancelled yesterday. So this is my therapy session.
Well, I will now know where I sent the invoice to. So no problem.
Exactly. And then just to wrap that up. So I mentioned the platform. Mm-hmm. So the platform is going to be quite a sophisticated platform for the community to join. So I've invested into the platform myself. I'm going to spend, after Berlin, I'm going offline almost, not entirely offline, but not hosting over the summer period. Going to be head down in the platform, in the build of the platform. And then when it's ready for beta, we're going to invite some members onto the platform to test and for feedback. And then we will go live with the platform. But I want to build it with the people that want to be on the platform, not just me building it based on what I think it should look like. So that's the idea for that. And of course, how we launch this needs to be in some bigger, community setting, not just around a dinner table, but I'm sure we're going to host something to bring that together.
Wow. And that all you think it will all, so the website and the platform within 2025?
Absolutely. The website's actually done.
Yeah.
I've just got a couple more things that I need to do to launch that. We're launching it first as the website for our partners.
Yes.
And so partners and corporates, that's the website. And the community will be connected to that. But that's going to take the next couple of months. But everything's going to be launched in 2025.
Beautiful.
Hold me accountable for September.
Yeah, beautiful,
latest.
Beautiful, and we will add all the info in links into the show notes of this episode.
Amazing.
And if people want to reach out, I can only imagine people want to reach out. Where can they find you?
Find me on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Okay.
Yeah, LinkedIn is where I spend most of my screen time.
Yes.
We do have an Instagram page, but it's not
LinkedIn for now.
My baby.
No. Well, one question to round it up. Where are you most proud of today?
Today?
Yeah, but not of today, but where you're standing right now.
Oh,
if
I
you're
see.
looking back. Sorry, no, not today.
I'm like, you asked a very direct question,
Yeah,
so I will translate that very literally.
No, but looking back, where are you the most proud of?
Well, recently we've been talking a lot about resilience. It also came up as a theme in one of our dinners, and I think everyone is talking about resilience in the workplace and well-being at the moment. And when I first left the company I worked for, and I was like a shell of myself, I remember saying to an old colleague at that moment in time, like, I thought I was more resilient than this. I remember saying that. And she had said to me, but Marie, you've got through this and you chose to step away and to stand in your power and, you know, tell your stories in whatever capacity you can tell them. And I didn't understand at the time, but as I'm getting better in terms of my health, my mental health, my own well-being, and through meeting all of these incredible people that I am meeting along this journey, I'm understanding that resilience is not, I wish I pushed myself further and I wish I kept going and, you know, I'm strong. Resilience is saying, this is no longer serving me and I need to take a step back or step down or step sideways or whatever that looks like. That's what resilience is. And so when you ask me what I'm most proud of today, it is my resilience to turn, and I think a lot of stories are similar to this, but really truly turning my challenges and adversities into my biggest strength. I really feel unstoppable at the moment. And like that's not down to anyone else other than me. And so I'm most proud of how resilient I am and have been and truly listening to myself.
Never ever doubt about that.
I mean, there's still imposter syndrome.
No, but that's why this is recorded, and that's why I'm challenging you to speak out loud and say this, and remember yourself also while listening back to this conversation.
I don't know if I can listen
to
this. Someone else can. But I'm excited to come back and see, you know, like where are we in 6 months or 7 months' time?
Please do. You're utmost welcome. And thank you very, very much for your bold openness, resilience, also vulnerability. I think that's part of your superpowers. It's vulnerability. Allowing yourself to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Maybe better put. And exciting times ahead. We are looking forward to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for holding space and for having me here.